The G Factor with Glenys, and I'm your host, Glenys Gassman. And today's guest, we have Dean Kilby. Hi, Dean. How are you?
Hi, good morning, good evening, whatever time people are listening to this.
Exactly. Now, Dean is a scientist, he's a consultant, he's a coach, and he can talk at length about metabolic health, regenerative medicine and longevity, health transformation, and biofeminology. No, I said that wrong now, didn't I, Dean?
You gave it a good crack. It's a weird word, biophenomenology.
Phenomenology and personal performance coaching. But for me, who Dean is he's added 20 years on, at least 20 years or more onto my life. He's allowed me to regain my vitality, my energy, and have a higher performing business. And he was instrumental, and it's only been since July 2021, instrumental in rewriting how my life goes. He gave me a process which my body's been following to become more efficient at losing weight and staying healthy at the same time. And for that, it's just priceless, right? You see, losing weight after menopause and up in your 60s is, I had it as being a hard thing to do. Well, I've just thrown that myth out the window because I've lost 25 kilos since then. And I am so proud, of myself, but Dean, my God, we start this universal year 6, I think it is, a universal year of 6 in numerology in 2022, which is relationships, deep healing, and responsibilities. And I thought, I need to get Dean on the G Factor because he has a different view on how all this could play out for us this year. And in the context of business, like a real high performing business. So welcome, Dean. Thank you. Thank you for, I just acknowledge you for what you do in the world of science and health and business as well. And I know you're in transit for some very important meetings today, but you're coming to us at the moment from Geelong, aren't you?
I'm in Geelong, yes. I normally live in Sydney, and I drove down from Sydney to Victoria a couple of days ago. I spent an evening in Bendigo, which is my hometown in the middle of Victoria, and then yesterday drove down to Geelong. So today I'm meeting with some important scientists, and I've got some things cooking in the background related to the COVID situation and how best to move forward and exit safely and effectively out of this whole lockdown situation. And as many people can understand and fully appreciate, locking down is the easy part. Unlocking takes a little bit more intellectual effort and more of a strategic approach. So I have some, very interesting high-level meetings today, which I'm very, very excited about. And I also get to meet and chat with one of my childhood heroes, who was a real inspiration for me in the scientific realm, a famous Nobel laureate and someone who's considered a national treasure. So I'm thrilled to have that ahead of me today, which is really cool.
It's like you're picking up your favorite, if anyone's out there with superhero magazines and, the superheroes, Spider-Man or whatever, you get to meet him today, yeah?
Yeah. Well, a couple of them. Speaking of superheroes, one of them, I'm actually picking him up straight after this and driving him to Melbourne, and we've got some important phone calls that we need to make whilst we're in the car together. But he's considered as the Batman, at least in the virology circles. He's the scientist that identified the horseshoe bat as the host reservoir of the SARS virus.
Right.
And so he's done extensive work in bat physiology and how some of these pathogens move from those animals, which constitute about 25% of the total global mammalian population, how they transfer to humans and can cause these types of outbreaks and, what we're experiencing now. So he's probably the number one COVID scientist on the planet right now. It's
wow. I would love to be in the backseat of that car.
Yeah.
Sounds really good. So thank you so much for, making time. I know you're really busy doing all this and, but just making time to be on the G Factor with me.
Pleasure. You look amazing, by the way.
Oh, thank you. I feel amazing,
Yes.
you know, for someone who's 63, you know, you wouldn't think it, would you?
No.
I don't even look it, you know. So I like to start the show off with, Dean, you know, what are you currently working on and what are you really excited about for 2022?
Yeah, I think, as I said, there's the COVID related projects that I'm working on, and some pretty important people. I mean, there's a way of measuring your functional immunity. So we're in this kind of era now where it's all about booster doses, and people are scratching their head. Why do we need them? Do I really need them? Is it necessary? If I have too many doses, will it cause further adverse events in my body, etc.? So there's a real need to understand what we call correlates of protection. So what can we measure that metric can give an indication of whether or not you're protected? And so far what we understand is neutralizing antibodies are the key correlate of protection. This is the part of the immune response, whether you're infected with the virus or obtain the vaccines, that actually stop the virus from binding to your own human cells. So if we can block that interaction of the spike protein on the virus interacting with the ACE2 receptor protein on your cells, then it basically sterilizes the virus and prevents the onset of symptomology and severe disease, obviously death in those that are most vulnerable. So we need to be able to measure that. And so I'm working with some key people around the world, actually, you know, here in Australia, Singapore, Gibraltar, Philippines, South Pacific. And this is especially important, not just for global travel, because we need to open the world up again. We don't, although Australia is an island, we don't, as human beings, really live on an island. We need to connect. We need to, you know, travel, move, and move products around the world as well. So this is absolutely critical.
It's key because, you know, I'm sorry to jump in there, but you know, from the people that I'm talking with and business owners, you know, they've almost put themselves, you know, into semi-lockdown because of what's going on right now, you know, and that just, we can't do that for the longevity anyway for businesses and performance. So we have to find a way to, you know, like have this, well, we've got to live with it, I suppose, you know, and the reality of it, isn't it, Dean? You know, we got to just accept it. We got to live with it. We got to get on with what we need to do.
Well, you know, we don't have to. There is another way. You can complain about it. You can stress about it. You can avoid dealing with it. You can make it wrong. You can resist it. But you know what? You suffer along the way. So
and what, you resist persists or something? I've heard that before.
Something like that. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
So there's, you know, you got to go with what's actually so. You got to deal with what's actually happening in reality, not some fantasy about how it should be or should have been, or why isn't it the way that I want it to be? Well, because it isn't, right? Yeah. So you got to go with what's actually happening right now. Yeah. And if there's a strategy to open up safely, effectively, and get people being more productive and get businesses operating more efficiently, effectively, and provide workplaces that are safe for the workforce, then, you know, I think that could contribute an enormous difference. So, yeah, you know, I think it's a worthwhile project. And then, you know, at the other end of the scale, what leaves people most susceptible to severe symptoms if they contract the virus and develop COVID-19? And it looks to be ill metabolic health. So if you've got a degree of metabolic dysfunction in your body, what that looks like for most people is you're overweight / obese, right? And, you know, that's a precursor to some other chronic diseases, like not just cardiovascular disease, but also type 2 diabetes. And at least, you know, goodness, by early last year, 2021, you know, we knew back then if you were type 2 diabetic, you were 12 times more likely to die from COVID-19 compared to someone who wasn't type 2 diabetic and had a normal, healthy metabolic rate. So, you know, it's a big problem. And type 2 diabetes is really the epidemic that we need to be focusing on. Unfortunately, what tends to happen when people isolate and lock down is they bake, they eat too much, they're white. Well, they're stressed, they're fearful.
Tell me about it.
And they lack distinctions.
I was in lockdown in Melbourne for 20 weeks or 21 weeks. And, you know, I did put on 10 kilos in that time. And, but I'd already previously put on a few kilos because I got married, you know, and I was in honeymoon stage, you know?
It's like the job is done. I got what I wanted. I can let go now.
So it was like, let's just have fun and go to the South Melbourne markets and eat whatever we felt like, oysters for breakfast and stuff like that. It was fun, right?
Yeah.
But, you know, and then during the lockdown, you know, I was making soda bread. I started really being a great cook. But then when my clothes were and then I started feeling my body ached, my knees ached, and I started feeling really lethargic. And I thought, right, it's time to do something about this. And I tried many things, as you know, and then nothing was coming off the way, you know, it just wasn't working. And luckily I got invited to a 60th birthday party. And when I went to see this lady, she was a third of a size when I saw her a year before. And I thought, what have you been doing? And anyway, she introduced me to you, which was the best thing that's actually happened to me in 2021. All right, so that's awesome. But look, tell me, you know, what's inspired you to actually go down this route in your career? You know, because this is huge, like, because we all know healthy body, healthy business, you know, we know your life just works when your body works, right? It's got to be number one. And in fact, you know, the number one habit of millionaires is health, looking after your health. The first thing they do in the morning is they do something to look after their health, right? So, you know, what inspired you to get involved in all of this, Dean?
Well, I've had always a background in science. As a kid growing up in Bendigo, it was just something that fascinated me. I was writing projects on brain anatomy and functioning when I was in grade 6. I mean, it was just really something of interest to me. It was quite fascinating. Yesterday, in fact, someone whose works I'd read extensively when I was younger, Dr. Carl Krasniewski, who's just a really well-known Australian science communicator. Yeah. And like I said, I grew up reading his books. I mean, he calls me yesterday. We had this fantastic conversation, and we're kind of dreaming up a particular project together. And you know, that's just amazing. And I think, again, I'm in Geelong. I took a walk by the beach last night just to kind of get present and experience some gratitude for where I am in life and what I'm up to, and being able to experience the kind of stuff that I get to is quite extraordinary. And I was thinking about where it all began, and it really was here in Geelong, where I was trained as a molecular virologist. So I did molecular biology, biochemistry, and microbiology at university, and then I did a further degree in biotechnology, and got trained in molecular virology, where I studied Hendra virus, which was one of the first zoonotic pathogens that moved from bats through horses to humans. And that was back in the mid to late 90s. And so it's been well over 22 years. I don't know how long it's been, but I've always had that kind of burning desire to learn more about what I deemed to be closest to the truth, which were these scientific pursuits. And I had a mentor very early on who said to me one time, Dean, you got to have faith in technology, but you have to develop yourself in stuff independent of technology. Yeah. And I thought, wow, that's awesome. And I repeated that to so many people over the years. And quite frankly, I wasn't at the source of what I was saying. It was something cool to say that made me look good. And it wasn't until much later that I discovered what he was actually talking about: the ability to listen, the ability to connect with people, the capacity to have some resilience when you hit some barriers in life, the willingness to bounce back, the opportunity to take advantage of this phenomenal gift it is to be alive and create contexts that give new life to the content that your life encompasses, and being up to something bigger than yourself and providing leadership. And none of that requires technology. None of that requires advancements in science, medicine, engineering. No, that's all part of the human condition.
Exactly.
And so it's been an amazing journey going from molecular virology, developing expertise in metabolic health, and I've also extensively trained as a coach, and I've provided that kind of leadership throughout the Australian New Zealand region for a number of years now. And then really it was during the early stages of the pandemic, I found myself sitting at home. I had a business that was doing quite well, but it was reliant on products that came from North America. And at some point it bottomed out because I just couldn't get those products off the pallet in the warehouse in Canada onto a plane over to Australia. And my US partners pulled out of the business, and Australia just wasn't worth their time and energy anymore. And so I found myself sitting at home wondering, what next?
Yeah.
And I sat in front of a whiteboard and asked myself, what have I got to contribute? And I started to write down my shelf assets, my core competencies. And I think what the most freeing aspect was the realization that everyone was screwed. And it was kind of like a leveling of the playing field. And I was just free to express myself.
Yeah.
And, I thought, what could I contribute right now? And there are a lot of people who are wanting to learn more about the pandemic, the virus, et cetera. I could educate people. There were people who wanted to handle their health. They were scared. I was able to work with them, coach them, help them transform their biochemistry. I reached out to Professor Wang in Singapore and I said, what are you cooking up? How can I contribute? And we started working together on a project that mostly focused on developing nations, because rich countries such as Australia or the US or whatever, we've got access to these medicines and medical systems, et cetera. But developing countries, if they don't have the right kind of infrastructure, tools, accesses, technologies, and if they're not free, then the world isn't free.
Yeah.
So I thought maybe this is an endeavor that I could get up to, and I created Simpler Health. And Simpler, SIMPLR, is an acronym. It stands for the Science of Immunometabolic Preparedness, Longevity, and Regeneration.
Wow, I didn't know that. I just thought Simpler.
Yeah. So that kind of wraps up everything that I'm interested in. I've got some expertise in, including regenerative medicine, stem cell technologies, and clinical applications of stem cells. So I helped to pioneer some of those treatment approaches here in Australia, and I'm also consulting to and working on the next generation of those types of approaches, and some exciting things happening in that realm as well. But
it's amazing what comes out of sitting down and writing on a blank canvas, like a blank whiteboard. Like behind me I have a whiteboard, but it's got stuff all over it for 2022, right? You know what I mean? But it's amazing what can come out and what you can create when you start looking at things as what you said, in the reality of the situation. And, I do the same, my background's accounting, and, I do the same with people in numbers, because in my coaching with businesses, because numbers is the language of business. I don't care what you say, but it is, right? It's just the numbers on the financial statements tell me the story. But so many people, so many business coaches or just people, and they're looking at their business, they don't look at the numbers. They shy away because they're not happy with them, So it's a bit like your weight, you got to wait till your bones creak, or you can't get up in the morning, or something happens before you do something about it, right? So with businesses, what I find is that a lot of them, before they actually even employ a coach or even go looking for a coach, they actually have to hit the rock button, or they haven't got the cash flow, or their team's left them. And now we've got the COVID debacle of short supply of people, short supply of stock, and then, like a pandemic as well. It's like there's a whole lot of stuff that's just impacting business owners, where we can actually get on top of it once we start looking at their numbers, right? So I get there's such a big correlation between health, what you're doing, the science of health and the science of business, and then pulling it together. And, you know, it doesn't have to even be in the last year, but since you did that whiteboard, what's an amazing result that you have achieved with somebody else? You know, like if it's in a business environment or, you know, weight loss or whatever, what have you been able to stop happening for a particular person? You know what I mean? Like health-wise or something through your protocol, because your protocol is an easy one to follow. I've been following it for 7 months, and I'm healthy. It's not like I'm not healthy with it. Do you know what I mean? So this is something that needs to get out there to business people, because you can operate a business and do this at the same time and be up to something bigger than who you are as well, right? You can really do this. So tell me, what's a big result that you got over the last?
Yeah, well, I think that last thing that you said, being up to something bigger than yourself, and that's the most rewarding aspect for myself. Being able to work with people and supporting them to fulfill on what they really want. Yeah. So it's not that I walk around the streets poking people in the belly, telling them, hey, what are you going to do about that? No, I work with people who come to me with a particular kind of commitment and what they want their life to be about. It seems, at least for them, that their health is in the way. And they've got some sense that maybe if they started there, you just got to start somewhere. If you start there, then let's open up and see what else might be possible. So I think it's thrilling for me to work with what I call big people, literally, with big lives. Like they've got a vision for themselves and their future that they want to fulfill on. They've got commitments that they need to realize, because there's that burning desire there, and there's a lack of satisfaction because they're not actually experiencing fulfilling on that. So yeah, to be able to go from a situation where it was very uncertain and scary, and be able to work with people to create at least some degree of certainty with regards to who they are and what their life could be about. And to coach people, yes, you lose the weight, but quite frankly, the science and all of that, like I said earlier, it's of interest to me. It's not who I am. I mean, if I speak from my heart of hearts, who I am as a coach, and being able to interact with people in that context, I mean, that just really gives me an opportunity to, or an access to interact with people. Yeah. And that's what's most fulfilling. I mean, it was quite lonely when you're sitting at home by yourself. I mean, you don't just want to fill your day watching Netflix. I'd much rather be on the phone to people, having conversations that make a difference. So yeah, especially with parents. And I think the most thrilling results for me are when parents of young kids, they allow me to contribute and they handle their own health. Like they actually get it handled, and they learn the basics, nutritional biochemistry. They understand how their body works. They have an as-lived experience of it. Along the way, they generate more energy. They're more present. They're sleeping better. They're in less pain. The brain fog disappears. So what I call this is a recalibration of the instrument that you are. And if you're going to calibrate an instrument, you've got to handle the signal to noise ratio. Yes. So a lot of people say things like, you got to listen to your own body. Well, too bad if the background noise is so high that you can't even hear your own biological signals. So what is that background noise? That background noise is the brain fog, the lethargy, the pain, and even the crappy conversations that you have about yourself and your body and your lot in life. And what if we can dampen that down, and then so you can actually hear clearly the biological signals, and then learn how to respond appropriately. So true. And what happens in that environment is our children, the next generation, grow up in a better nutritional environment. They get fed better. Their brains develop better. They grow up smarter, more responsible. And I mean that. There's a physiological relationship between the amount of sugar that children consume, the lack of protein that they consume, and the inconsequential relationship they have to life as they get older. So this next generation is the next generation of leadership on this planet. And I think the biggest impact we can have to making a difference in the world is looking after childhood nutrition. Yeah. when parents handle their own stuff, kids grow up in that clearing. So I think that's the most thrilling thing for me.
That's awesome. And so, you know, what advice would you give, you know, parents, business owners, you know, like we've got the context of business owners who are also parents. There's so many mum and dad businesses out there. In fact, you know, there's round about 85% of them only are turning over less than 2 million, and 63% of them are turning over less than 200,000 in Australia. I just looked at some stats yesterday, right? There's a lot of small businesses out there that get up, probably work 6 days a week, unhealthy, got kids, got to make the money to, you know, come home and feed the kids, that sort of stuff. And so, you know, what advice would you give business owners in that context to have a quantum leap in their health and eventually business?
Yeah, I mean, it's
2022.
Goes hand in hand. If you're going to have what you just referred to as a quantum leap, like this real transformation, not just incremental improvements over time, there really needs to be a willingness for that to happen, first and foremost. So you need to deal with the degree to which it doesn't occur for you as possible. And no one wants to admit that they're that pessimistic in life. You know, people like to say that they're relatively optimistic. I don't think so, right? Because if you look at the way people behave and people's behavior, their actions and inactions in life, in other words, their performance is perfectly correlated to the way the situation occurs to them.
Yeah.
So if it occurs as too hard, not possible, and you said there's conversations like it's not my fault, it's their fault, if all of this sort of stuff, you're going to behave in a particular way. And you just got to be a fly on the wall observing people in life. It doesn't take much to realize that they're not that damn optimistic. So you have to first confront the degree to which you've gone from when you were young, wow, the world is my oyster, anything is possible, to now, this is my lot in life and I need to stress and suffer and no one really understands what I'm dealing with and I'm misunderstood. And if someone would just give me a break, no, you got to cause all of this yourself. So it starts there. You've got to have at least with health, you've got to have a real breakthrough in participation. And that starts with what you said earlier. You've got to start with the what so. You've got to be clear about, okay, what am I dealing with right now? How much do you weigh? I mean, you've got to understand your body composition, your muscle to fat ratio. You've got to understand what's your waist circumference. I mean, for men in particular, if you've got a waist circumference above 94 centimeters, you've got to handle that. I mean, you're at risk of metabolic syndrome, cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, early onset dementia. I mean, all of these things contribute to heightened inflammation in the body. You'll end up with osteoarthritic joints, pain. I mean, osteoarthritis is the number one cause of pain and disability in at least Australia, right?
Yeah.
So all of that stuff gets in the way of your ability to perform in the areas that really matter to you. So you've got to have breakthrough in participation. You've got to grow up.
Yeah.
You've got to get beyond trying to make up for something in the past, prove something to someone, validate yourself, stop having life be about getting the strokes and the pats on the back. And, I wish people would just acknowledge and recognize me. It's got to get beyond that. So if you have a breakthrough in growing up as well, and if you look at the pandemic and how people have eaten over the pandemic, what do people eat? They eat foods that have a high content of sugar or refined carbohydrates and fat. So this nutrient combination doesn't tend to happen in nature. You get protein and fat, you get protein and carbs together, but rarely do you ever see carbs and fat together. We put them together in the form of biscuits and cake and cheese on bread and pizza and all this sort of stuff, right? So chocolate. Yeah. Now, why do we become addicted? I mean, firstly, those foods are very addictive. Why though? Well, when you're an infant, breastfeeding, that is one place in the universe where you do find that nutrient combination, the lactose, which is the sugar in milk, and there's a decent fat content there in milk. And that's totally appropriate for an infant during that most rapid growth period of their life. But guess what? You weaned off the boob. And this then didn't grow up. Why? Because it's not your fault, but you know, that we kept getting fed dairy and bastardizations of it, from chocolate to ice cream, and then savory versions like deep fried potato. And so we eat these foods. When people say I'm a comfort eater, I'm a stress eater, an emotional eater, well, there's life is occurring like some kind of threat to you right now. You turn to those foods because it reminds your brain of the most safest, nurturing, nourishing place in the universe, your mother's boob. So you need to grow up. No other mammal continues eating those types of foods. No other mammal breastfeeds for their entire adult life. Stop doing that yourself. So you've got to grow up, right? And then when you grow up, you've got to handle what's actually there and stop avoiding life and deal with it. It feels sometimes like you're going to die. I promise you, you won't. And even if you do, it won't bother you. You'll be dead. So just relax. And then, right?
That's so cool. Yeah, I get that.
The last one, I think, there's got to be this, as far as I can tell in my own experience, you know, I'm not some business genius, but, you know, in my own experience, my own failures, from what I can see, business success is a function of self-expression and your ability to communicate. And if there are some, if it's all about, if the concern is all on yourself, your self-expression is going to be limited. I mean, you won't get up in front of groups of people. You won't put yourself out there. You won't take the risk. There'll be too much self-concern, and it'll impact your capacity and your freedom and the power of your communications out into the marketplace. So you got to discover for yourself that your body does not belong to you.
Yeah, that's a hard thing for some people to be able to do, isn't it?
Oh, it's near impossible. That's why you've got to have a coach, because left to your own devices, you won't. You're too internal. So when you get this skin bag, this machine that allows you to proceed through life and experience life and be productive, etc., it doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the people who love you. It belongs to the commitments that you're out to fulfill. It belongs to the communities that you want to serve. It's your job to look after it. You're responsible for the maintenance and well-being of this thing, but it doesn't belong to you. And when people get that, they stop messing with it. They stop taking it for granted. They stop abusing it. And people go, oh, but Dean, I love food so much. No, you don't. You abuse food. Don't tell me you love food so much. You eat the same crap day in, day out. That's not a love for food. So that's,
wow, that's amazing.
You know, And when you get that context, it stops being about your likes and dislikes and what feels good in your mouth and all of that sort of stuff. And all that stuff's great and important. You should have that every now and again too, but that's what it can't be just about that.
It can't be about you. And that's so true in business. Business is not about you. You're doing what you love to do. You're passionate about it, but it's not about you. It's about your customers. It's about your clients. Because other than that, you're just leading a very small business, right? So willingness. So there was three things. It's one, you got to grow.
You got to participate in your health, right? Health is a function of participation. You got to grow up. And, you know, we've all got this juvenile brain that's now trying to manage an adult aging body. Good luck. You can't keep being that snot-nosed teenager who just wants to do what they want to do when they want to do it. Well, too bad, so sad. You got to be an adult and grow up, right? And then lastly, you got to discover for yourself. And it really is a process of discovery that your body doesn't belong to you. And it's kind of like, you know, if you had a very expensive car that you lent to me, right? So I'm borrowing your car. I'm going to look after that thing. I'm not going to put E10 petrol in it. I'm not going to leave. I'm going to service it on time. I'm not going to throw a McDonald's wrapper on the floor. You know, I'm going to treat it in a particular way. But why? Because it's a responsibility that I take on, given that you were generous enough to loan it to me, to lend it to me. And when you get that your body is not yours, you start to take better care of it.
And all of what you're saying is so true, and it doesn't cost a thing. You know what I mean? Like, these are things for us to, as humans, to discover and put in place ourselves. It doesn't cost us anything. However, you said this before, and I picked that up, you know, if left to our own devices, look at what we've done to ourselves. You know what I mean? Like, we just go and make that bread and put the carbs and the fat together because it tastes good. But if you actually have a coach who's actually getting you to realize that of your contribution to the world, your contribution to leadership, your contribution to the youth, our new leaders of the world, if you can really start having a coach that empowers you around what's really passionate for you, this health thing will just happen. You will start to look after yourself. You'll start.
Yeah, well, I mean, the cost, it does cost you something.
Oh, it costs you something to have a coach, but to
No.
actually,
Let's take a step back. You know, what does it cost you? It costs you.
Oh yeah.
You've got to give something up. You got to give up being right about your situation. You've got to give up the victim view that you have of your lot in life. You've got to give up your righteousness. You've got to give up the resignation. So it does cost you all of those things, right? Yeah. So that takes a high degree of maturity to handle your health, because quite frankly, the world that we live in, the environment that we live in, is not supportive of us being well. And it is very much like a kid in a candy store where you've just got access to anything and everything that you want in the moment that you want it. So we live this very impulsive life where everything's accessible. And, you know, you've got to develop, it's not about willpower, it's about being responsible for the environment that you live in and who's there in that environment as a matter of your words. So it does cost that immature self.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? And then, like you said, through the process of that, you grow up.
Yeah. Now, here's the paradox. You, like as a being, as the self grows up, like you become an adult, this thing becomes younger.
Yeah.
More energy, you look better, you sleep better, you're more present with the people that really matter to you. You can make decisions faster when there isn't that inflammation clouding your brain, when you're not overly concerned with the pain issues. You can be way more active. You can do things like, you know, Professor Wang, for example, he said, Dean, I don't know if I've got time to see you. I've got all these high-level meetings. I don't know how I can make it work. And I said, where's the most important meetings on what day? And he said, Thursday. I said, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to come from Sydney down to Geelong. I'm going to pick you up in the morning and let me drive you there. And I'll spend that time with you in the car. We can talk. And then I'll organize a dinner. You've got to eat afterwards at the end of the day. And then I'll invite people to that dinner. We can handle it all there, what needs to get handled. Then I'll drive you home, right, all the way back. And, you know, he's stressed and he's worried about I've got to get the COVID test before traveling back to Singapore, et cetera. And I said, don't worry, I'll handle that. So I've invited to the dinner the pathologist that owns the COVID testing company that handles all of that in the airport. So I thought I'm going to bring him along and just introduce them directly. And so, you know, all of that is possible when you've got a clear mind and you've got the energy to fulfill on it. You're not dragging your ass saying, oh, it's so much and I can't do it all and I'm too tired. And you know what I mean?
Yeah, I get it. I totally get it. I'm so much more productive and sleep so much better. And I still got 7 kilos to go. That's cool.
Wow.
And I know.
You'll do that. You'll do that in less than 2 months. That's amazing.
I know. How exciting is that? Oh my God. And I haven't been this weight since probably 18, 20.
Yeah, right. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So look out.
I love it when people say to me, I had one guy say to me, Dean, I think he lost about 50 kilograms. And he said he was in the 80s. Can't remember, 80. I think when he was about 87, 86 kilograms. And he said, oh my God, I just realized I haven't been in the 80s since the 80s.
Yeah.
And I thought, what must that be like for people in really such a short space of time? Because women typically lose 1 to 1.5 kilograms per week after week, and men typically lose 2 to 3 kilograms without any strenuous exercise. I have a very different approach that flies in the face of what's typically known to be true. And when people wake up and there's 30 kilograms of mass that just isn't there anymore, must that be like for people? I mean, it's fascinating for me because I've never personally dealt with it myself. So I have a huge amount of respect and admiration for those that allow me to contribute and produce the results. But, you know, it's their commitment coming together with my coaching, all backed by the science. And that's where miracles can happen. And I love seeing people then use this opportunity to be fully vital and alive with a rejuvenated sense of health and vitality to go get up to something, like you say, bigger than themselves. And they start businesses, they start new relationships, they take their life to a whole other. I mean, it's just really thrilling for me.
You know, one of the biggest things that I notice is when I wake up in the morning and I get out of bed and there's no stiffness of joints, there's nothing, you know. I get out of bed, oh, this feels easy. You know what I mean? And
yes.
And I have a 2-storied place, and you know, I'm up and down the stairs without holding on or without any problems, and my knees don't ache anymore. And it's like, this is amazing, you know.
Yeah.
Anyway,
yeah.
I want to
look, and then there's surprising impacts that happen along the way. There's the bodily stuff, the physiological stuff, the psychological stuff, but there's also your relationship to your word. Because you make promises and you stick to it 4 times a day, day after day, week after week, month after month. And for a human being to be guided and supported to be able to do that, they reach a point where you can now see yourself as good for your word. Like you can trust yourself again. I think that's one of the greatest gifts that people gain out of this process is an ability to trust themselves again. And then you can give, when your word has that kind of power, you can give your word to great things, and there's more of an opportunity set for it to be realized in the world. And that's just super exciting when you have that view of yourself.
Absolutely. It's amazing what can happen and what is going to happen in the next generation, like you said before. So, Dean, this has been wonderful. It's been a great experience having a chat with you today and just, you know, really hearing where your passion is, what you're doing for the world and everyone around health, COVID, everything. So I have one last question for you.
Yes.
All right. So the G factor is a unique set of skills, disciplines, experiences that give you the edge in being successful, right? And so when you look back at everything that you've done and everything that you've achieved, what's the one skill or discipline, and I think you probably already said it, but anyway, what's the one skill or discipline that you believe to be the most important to your success? So what's your G factor?
Oh, wow. I don't know. A G factor kind of occurs to me like some kind of a superpower.
It is a superpower.
Yeah. Well, I think for me, it's the ability to distinguish context.
Yeah.
And really challenge the context in which I'm operating and be responsible for those contexts, not blame my past, blame my failures, or anything that's occurred as a hindrance in my life. No, that's a context right now that I'm generating. And if I can take responsibility for that, then I can generate any context. And it's that when you transform the context, it gives new life to the content that it encompasses. And I think that's what there is to master as we proceed through life. You know, there are some basics that are absolutely essential. Like you've got to honor your word, and you got to keep your relationships complete, and you've got to perform. You've got to get out of your internal state, your thoughts and memories and mental states and emotional states and even body sensations and the obsession with all of that. And you've got to get back out here in the world performing, because that's all the universe responds to is action or inaction. And if I can practice that and to whatever degree assist in transferring that to other people and bringing that out in them, I think it's a life worth living. But really context, listening to what's actually happening. So your access to the context is your behavior. You just got to look at how you're actually acting. And it's like, what must the context be given that these are the actions or inactions that are happening?
Yeah, and, I get it.
And that's like, you just got to stop for a moment and kind of take a view. You got to come back on Mars and take from that perspective and look back down and go, okay, let me get out of the drama and look at the realities of my life. So
creating context is your key factor. The ability to do that, and quickly, by the sounds of things. Well,
we're all mastering that one. No one's arrived at any point where it's a done deal. That's
the fun part of it all, isn't it?
I think so. That's the adventure.
We get to create, and then we get to work out, oh, that didn't work. Okay, well, we'll pull back and we'll have a look, and then let's go again. And it's all growth. It's growth, isn't it? I love it.
Yeah.
So what's the best way for people to reach out to you, Dean? Like website, contact, something like that?
Yeah, go to the website, visit simpler.health, simpler.health. And you can, contact me through there. You can look me up on Facebook, LinkedIn, etc. I also own thewinedoctor.com.au. So The Wine Doctor, that's where I also retail the world's healthiest wine, because it's all about lifestyle as well. So if you're going to consume some of these luxury products, you may as well consume it in a way that contributes to your health and vitality and longevity as well. We've elevated the anti-aging properties of the wine 100 to 200 fold. So I think that's a major advancement in, vino technology, and I'm thrilled to be able to offer that to people as well. So
I'm going to have to buy a bottle. I'll get to my goal weight first.
When you get to your goal weight and we transition you, and then you can safely consume alcohol, absolutely. I'm a huge advocate of regular consumption of moderate amounts of wine, consistent with the Mediterranean way of eating.
Yeah, it sounds wonderful. Awesome. Well, look, Dean, I know you've got a busy day, an exciting day. Like I said, I'd love to be in the backseat of that car today. I appreciate your time that you've taken today, and being able to share your knowledge, your experience, and all around the context of, health, business, vitality. And I look forward to seeing what's actually happening out there in the world from what you're creating later on. So have a fantastic day, and we'll talk soon.
It's great.
I'm sure.
It's great. I love you too. Likewise.
Okay.
Thanks, Glenys.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.